Today, I'm going to show you one of the specific ways I improve my hand embroidery skills. Whenever you're working within a medium and you find something that really works for you, it is so easy to find yourself stuck in a rut and just doing what has worked for you in the past. And in a lot of times, this can lead to artist block. And so, this is an exercise that I do to kind of break out of that. I don't necessarily always enjoy doing this exercise, but I am always grateful for it. So I will choose a few techniques or colors that I rarely use, and I will try to stitch an object 3 different ways using those techniques. In this case, I decided I was going to try to stitch a blueberry pie 3 ways and see which way I liked the best, see what things worked, what didn't, what was easy, what was hard, what colors I liked. You can use this for anything. So for the first pie, I decided I was going to do a basket weave stitch, which I rarely do. This is a stitch in which you make horizontal or vertical lines to begin, and then you weave your needle through those long stitches to create the illusion of a basket or lattice, depending on how closely you're weaving. When you go to your next row, you're going to alternate weaving over and under the opposite way that you did in the previous row. For this first pie, I decided I wanted to see what a tight lattice on top would look like, which was surprisingly challenging. And I remembered exactly why I don't usually do this stitch, especially with 6 strands. But with a little bit of practice and determination, I made it through and I did like it, to be honest. So while this is a pretty labor intensive stitch, especially when you're weaving with threads so close together, I started to think of ways I could make it easier to do if I was going to do this again. In this case, I noticed that if I moved my needle to one side, things didn't get caught so frequently. And for super stubborn areas, I actually pressed up with my finger on the underside of the work, which helped me get my needle under the horizontal stitches a lot easier. I also did not make it a point that I felt I had to get my needle through every single horizontal stitch. Like if it broke up in the middle, I just did the middle and then I did the second half on its own. And that really helped me a lot as well. I also noticed though, by doing that, it felt like my vertical weave wasn't as close to the previous row as I liked. So I ended up using my needle a lot of the time to kind of scoot things over to how I wanted them to look. Because again, the point of this particular pie was a really closed weave on top. So now I decided, okay, well, I've made the pie. It looks all right. I really would like to have a crust on the outside, however. And I just decided to do a backstitch one. And I thought it looked a little plain next to, this other thing. I mean, it kind of looked okay, but I really wanted to see what a whipped backstitch would look like. And I really did like it. I expected it to be a little bit puffier considering I used all 6 strands. So that was something I kept in mind. And when I got to this point, I saw that I wasn't really able to get all the gaps filled. So I decided I was going to add some French knots to add some blueberries into these like little pockets that just didn't get weaved together. And to be honest, my mind at this point was very proud of myself. I was like, this is a work smarter, not harder moment for sure. I'm not really a French knot hater, but I mean, they take some time if you're going to try to fill in a big section. So this did feel like a pretty time effective way to get the illusion of a blueberry pie without actually having to go through all the effort of filling in this area with French knots. But as I was doing it, I was worried that this particular pie wasn't going to have the right amount of depth that I wanted. So I was like, how am I going to make more depth now on this second pie? And gosh darn it, it was to add French knots everywhere, which, yes, took forever. Again, like sometimes I really don't enjoy this process, but I am always so grateful for it. It really gets your critical thinking skills going. And if I was ever going to do this again, I know exactly how I would stitch this dang pie. So I decided I was also going to use multiple different colors to add a little bit more depth as well. So I just kept rolling with the dark, medium, and light shade. I think I ended up doing 4 different colors for these French knots all together. And I can't deny, even though it took a long time, it's beautiful. I was really happy with it. And because I was so happy with it, I wanted to showcase that a little bit more than on the first one. Like all this hard work, I want to see it. So I decided to make my lattice work more open and on a diagonal because I just thought it might be interesting to see what that looked like. It's the same weaving technique, it's just that our initial stitching is wider. That's the only difference. But it's still the same technique, so it was still helpful to me. Now, first thing I noticed immediately was how much easier this was to weave in and out, but I still used some of my techniques from the first go around. For instance, I, in this case, did not get under every single row because it was very difficult to do so, and I still use my needle to kind of arrange them how I would like. So, as you can see, like we've already learned a lot from that first pie, and by taking what we learned in the first go around and taking it to this next one that's the same thing just done differently, we have a really beautiful experimentation process and be like, what works, what doesn't work. So in this case, I was like, all right, let's see what a backstitch crust is going to look like because this is now pretty complex on top. And even though I thought it was pretty simple on that first pie, I really like it on the second pie, and I decided I was going to leave it alone. Now, finally, for pie number 3, I was so incredibly tired of doing French knots, and I've really been enjoying working with felt these days, so I decided I was going to use this blue felt to symbolize the blueberries, and I was going to stuff it to give it kind of a puffy look. I just thought it would be interesting and I wanted to try it, see what it looked like. So I secured the felt around the edge using running stitch and left a little bit open. So I had enough room where I could stuff some felt scraps in there. I got a little overzealous with this. I did really want it to be obviously stuffed, but looking back, I 100% regret like 2 of those scraps and I wish I could take it back. But again, that's what this whole point is about because now I really like that open lattice look. And so I decided I was going to do the same thing, but I was going to do it horizontal to see which style I liked the best. But I made this so puffy that it was a little bit difficult to do because on this iteration, I also wanted to use 2 different colors of floss. So I have like a darker and a lighter shade. And honestly, these are a little bit too wide. And weaving on top of the felt was by far the most annoying, actually, because the needle kept getting caught on the really soft fibers of the felt that I was using, which I'll be honest, I didn't really expect to dislike that as much as I did, but I really did. So I probably would not use felt again in making this pie, but here's the thing. Now I know that. This exercise is all about figuring out what will work and what doesn't work. So we're just experimenting. It's so good for your brain. It's really important to continually try new things as an artist because gosh, you never know what you could stumble into that's going to just like really change your work for the better. I, for one, this year want to start using a lot more texture in my work, which is really strange to say as someone who considers himself like exclusively a thread painter. So I'm really glad I did this today, even though it was a long day and it was a little frustrating because I've got a few more techniques now that I feel like I understand a lot better. And that's a really cool thing. And if you decide that you're going to try this, yeah, just keep in mind what works, what doesn't. Which pie was your favorite? Thanks for watching.